All right, boys and girls, this is our 4.4 notes. This is the first online lesson that we are doing. What you need to do for me is, if there's something you think I should change or something you truly dislike about it, I would appreciate if you left a comment in the comment section, or if you liked or disliked the video, to let me know. We're going to be doing these a lot, so the more input you guys give me, the better off you will be, because you can actually have something that you like. The major topics for today's lesson are these three things. And the first one is Britain declaring war on France, which is a big issue. We're going to learn about the 7 Years' War and the French and Indian War and all these different parts of it. Second one is the first major battle of the French and Indian War, which is called Braddock's Defeat. It's going to be in your books, called Braddock Marches on Duquesne. And you got to remember that, because it's very important, because it's the first failure of the French and Indian War, and George Washington's there, and he kind of sees how this war is going to go, and it kind of shapes him a little bit. And then the last thing we learned about is a man named William Pitt, who's the Prime Minister of England, and him taking over after Edward Braddock is killed. So once again, as I said in class, what you should be doing is kind of a simple thing. The first time you do this, you're going to very simply write down the notes. After you write down the notes, there's about 5 slides, I think, so it shouldn't take you more than, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. You're going to go back and you're going to listen to the same presentation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you notes. I'm going to give you a little bit of extra info, stuff you might want to jot down. I'll tell you when to put a star next to something or underline it if it's really important, to reiterate the points that you need to know. So the first time, I would like you to just write down the notes. The second time, I want you to go over it again. And I want you to actually listen and kind of mark anything that I tell you. It's a good thing. You're going to listen to it twice, first off, which is a good thing. A repetition kind of makes it permanent. And secondly, it kind of helps you in a way, because we're not skipping forward. We're not doing anything that is going to rush anybody. You can do this at your own pace, which I think is a much better idea than just taking these notes in class. All right, so let's begin. The British take action. I know this looks like a long, kind of intimidating slide, but it's just a few short sentences. But there's some big points you need to know. You need to know that the war takes place between the 1750s and the 1760s, and the actual war is known as the 7 Years' War. What we're going to learn about the French and Indian War is part of a larger struggle known as the 7 Years' War. The French and Indian War is just the piece or the theater that takes place in America. The French are building forts. So what's happening is all this friction starting because the French are building forts in the Ohio River Valley, in the Great Lakes region, and they're making alliances with Native Americans. And by doing that, they're effectively cutting the British out of the fur trade, which upsets the British. Also, by taking those settlements in the Ohio River Valley, what's happening is they're cutting off the British from westward expansion, because they now control the land all the way from New France, all the way down to Louisiana. And this is a problem. If you remember the video, we saw a video the other day where it had a whole bunch of shields kind of connecting the French settlements together, all the way from Canada all the way down to Louisiana. Well, that's what's happening, and this upsets the British. So what do? They send a man named Edward Braddock, who was a general in the British Army. The problem is Edward Braddock is one of these people who's never actually fought. He's just very well politically connected. He knows the right people, so he's not battle-tested. He's not one of these people who has experience. George Washington, believe it or not, actually has more experience than he does with his one major defeat at Fort Necessity. So Braddock is sent here, and Braddock's only job, he has one goal: to drive the French out of the Ohio River Valley. He figures if he can get them out of the Ohio River Valley, they'll leave what we would consider America, go back into Canada, and stay down in Louisiana, and they won't have to worry about them anymore. So his only goal is to get them out of the Ohio River Valley. Something you might want to put a star next to is next to the 3rd and 4th bullets, which is the French were building forts and making alliances, and that they controlled a large area of land. Because that's kind of an important thing to remember, and it kind of sets the stage for why the British are so upset. So Britain finally declares war. You're going to want to put a star next to pretty much everything on this page. So, underline it, do whatever you need to do. But the French and Indian War is part of a much larger war known as the 7 Years' War. I think we've already said that. And what you need to remember is that England allies itself with Prussia. Prussia is current-day Austria and Germany, that kind of area, if you're looking at a map. And they're basically mercenaries. These are people who, in a certain village in Prussia known as Hessia or Hessia, they're raised kind of like how the Spartans were. They're raised to fight. The men are taken at a young age and they're trained, and the best soldiers stay in. And for the right price, they will fight with you, which in England's case is a good thing because England needs some feared fighters. And if there's one country I'm sure you can imagine that hates England more than France does, it is Spain. So Spain allies itself with France. You remember we learned in the 1500s that the English defeated the Spanish Armada. Well, the Spanish still aren't over it yet. They're kind of holding a grudge. So they ally themselves with they ally themselves with France to kind of get a little bit of revenge and help out the French and hopefully get more territory also in North America. Because again, the Spanish are just kind of regulated to Florida at this point. They're fighting all over the world, including America, once again, all over Europe and other territories. So it's not just specifically in America, but what we're going to learn about is specifically in America. And I made a little graphic organizer for you with us and them. Us being the British, we allied ourselves with Prussia. So England and Prussia on one side, and the other side, as I named it, them, France and Spain fighting against us. So the pictures to the right are of a man named Edward Braddock. We already spoke about him, but what you need to know once again is that he's a very traditional general. He's one of these people that is going to go by the book, and it ends up being his downfall, ends up being his demise, because what's happening is Braddock is marching a large force down into the Ohio River Valley. And as he's doing that, it's very slow. 1,400 troops going over, every tree, every kind of molehill, every kind of small hill. They're leveling these things. They're felling or cutting down the trees. So it takes a long time. He's very slow. He brings a man named George Washington. You might have heard of him once or twice with him, but as an aide, not as an actual military general. So what you need to know about this is that as they're marching, they're obviously going to be attacked. And they're attacked by the French Native Americans who kind of ambush them. What they do is they station a small regiment of troops, and they kind of draw the British in. And as they're retreating, and as the British are following them kind of in pursuit, well, the Native Americans, the French, or whatever, we're actually going to watch a video on this, and they lure them into like this basically, I guess you call it a valley, with hills on both sides, and it basically turns into shooting fish in a barrel. It's so confusing for the British soldiers that they're actually shooting each other accidentally. About 1,000 redcoats die, including Braddock. Okay, and you could argue that the reason why he is killed is because he refuses to not fight in that traditional style. Fight with the Native American style. He only fights in a traditional style, where the Native Americans and French hide in the trees and shoot from above. So about 1,000 redcoats are killed, including Braddock. And something interesting that I learned as doing some research for the presentation for you guys, getting a little bit of extra info, is that probably some of the boys, maybe some of the girls would get this, but I guess in the new Assassin's Creed game, there is a mission called Braddock's Defeat or something of the like, and you actually kill Edward Braddock. So I don't want you going around thinking that there was some kind of Native American assassin going around looking for Edward Braddock, because it was not like that. However, kind of interesting fact, and if it helps you remember who Edward Braddock is, then more power to you. If it helps, use it. After Braddock, a man named William Pitt takes charge of the British forces. William Pitt, once again, is a political person. He is not somebody who has any military experience. He's not even really in the military. He's the prime minister. However, he is tasked with controlling the forces and handing it over to people who will drive the British out of the Ohio River Valley. But he makes a promise, and you got to put a star next to this and underline it, because this is really, really important. This is actually one of the causes of the American Revolution. He promises the colonists that Britain will pay the entire war. Okay, he'll pay for the entire conflict. He says none of the cost will fall on the colonists, which is a lie, but he doesn't tell us that. He runs up a huge debt, and eventually Britain ends up raising taxes in the colonies, which becomes a problem, which directly leads to the American Revolution. But before we get into that, it's a couple months away before we get into the Revolution, so we'll keep it as William Pitt promises to pay for the war and doesn't, and it causes a problem. But William Pitt kind of says, all right, well, the Ohio River Valley is great and everything, but what we really need to do is drive them from the entire continent. So what he wants to do is he wants to drive the French out of Canada. Canada is their main settlement. Canada is where most of the French are, and he wants to make sure that they leave. He doesn't want them on the continent at all. So what he ends up doing is he hands it over to a couple people. He hands it over to a man named Jeffrey Amherst and a man named James Wolfe. And he says, you're going to take the two biggest cities in Canada of Montreal and Quebec. And what I want you to do on the way there is I want you to basically decimate the French Native American population as you travel there. And this is what they do. They take 3 forts back that were English. They take Louisbourg, Fort Frontenac, and Fort Duquesne. And they basically just kind of wreak havoc on the way up until they get to Quebec and Montreal. Jeffrey Amherst goes to Montreal and James Wolfe goes to Quebec. They're kind of neat stories. We're actually, again, going to watch a video, a short, 10 or 15 minute clip. James Wolfe is very drawn out process. It does take Quebec, but it's a very long, kind of drawn out story for it. It's important to remember that it's not just about the Ohio River Valley anymore. William Pitt has an idea, and he wants to drive them off the complete continent at this point. He no longer wants them here. All right, so that is the lesson for tonight. I'll post the other one tomorrow. I will record it tomorrow, and I will post it online. So we'll probably do this like a 2-day thing. And when you come in tomorrow, be ready to answer questions to make sure that you know what you're talking about. You'll probably walk into some questions, so be ready for that. And just make sure that you're prepared. So again, you should have your notes done. If you have not had your notes done by now, then you should be getting them done, and you should be listening to this again, just listening and marking down things as you go. Let's make this easier on ourselves. Again, leave some comments. Let me know what you think. Let me know if I could change anything. More pictures, maybe insert a video or something like that. You let me know, and I will do the best that I can to make sure that the needs and what makes it better are met. Okay? All right. Thank you very much, and we will work on this in class.